Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. Today, I'm delighted we're going to be speaking to Megan Hoskin. Megan is an advocate of adventures in any shape or size, is particular to an overnight bivi wild camp under the stars, as well as an epic self-powered voyage. She's also an avid fan of all that's deemed a challenge. Megan's going to be sharing more about her journey, her love of mountaineering, and why she has set herself possibly one of the biggest challenges ever in 2018. Megan, tell everybody a little bit more about you.
Gosh, where to start? I'm 34. I live in London. I guess I've been sort of running around doing all kinds of things, sort of outdoorsy and active and so on, for a number of years, ever since I was very young. But I've had a huge sort of number of changes going on in the last year or so, and lots of things happening and big plans for the future. So yeah, it's a lot. It's all been crazy.
Tell us about some of those changes. What's been happening
at the moment. The last year, I've sort of walked away from what was a sort of perfectly stable and normal career. I was working in business management in banking. Not quite sure how I rooted to that, as I did a music degree back in the day. But yes, I was doing that. I've been doing that for a number of years. But I've always really just had a massive draw to the outdoors and spent the last decade, I think it is now, kind of running off and doing everything I can squeeze into my 4 or 5 weeks holiday a year. And I think the more I was going to do things like that, the more it was actually highlighting to me that it wasn't enough, that I needed to find a way to incorporate that into my life a little bit more permanently, a little bit more in the day-to-day, and not being the escape that I run away to. So I've quit that last year. And I've been focused on trying to build a bit of a new life and the way to move forwards.
So let's go back then. So you're working in banking. I've been there, done that. I can totally understand why you want to move away from it. But you did have these 4 or 5 weeks holiday a year. What sort of adventures were you going on? What sort of challenges were you doing?
To be honest, when I was a teenager, I had an amazing opportunity. I got to go off to Borneo on a sort of world challenge type expedition. So I signed up to that when I was 15, got to go when I was 17, got to run around the jungle, climb my first mountain, which was Kinabalu. And I really remember saying to myself when I climbed that, in a pair of marigolds, I will say, because I certainly didn't have a clue about proper kit or equipment back then. But I remember saying to myself, this is pretty good. I think I'll go for K2 one day, which was obviously a little bit ambitious, but never say never, hey. So I sort of got a bit of a taste for it then. And then I think we all get distracted. We go to university, we have loads of fun, we start jobs, we start building a career, we have homes and friends and sort of social networks and things like that. But I remember one day, I think it was sort of back about 2011, I was 27 or so then, and everything was great. I was, living with a really good friend, had a great social life. I was playing a lot of sport, all was well. But when you're in your 20s, perhaps work hard, play hard. And I think one particular Friday night, I probably went out and enjoyed a few too many drinks, and just woke up the next morning thinking, I've got to do something. I have to do something. So I think looking back, I was probably hungover and a bit tipsy maybe still. But within a couple of hours, I had booked myself onto a trip to go and trek to Everest Base Camp a couple of months later. And that doing that, I think, has absolutely kick-started what now has been the last 7-8 years of one of the biggest themes, to be honest, in my life, which has been mountains, running away to the mountains at every opportunity. And that's very much been what I've done with every single scrap of holiday that I've had between working ever since.
So let's just go back to the Everest Base Camp. I mean, you've booked it on a whim, amazing, absolutely love it. But what goes through through your mind later when it's the preparation, it's the planning, it's heading out to this environment, it's heading out to Nepal, which maybe you haven't been to before? What was it like in that run up to actually heading out to Everest Base Camp?
It was hugely exciting, completely unknown. You know, I was sort of trying to figure out what on earth I needed in terms of kit. I think I actually ended up doing the trek in with what was sort of more suited probably to an office type backpack. You know, it didn't even have a waist strap on it. And I was going down the gym and thinking, oh, I should figure out how this all works. But just immense excitement, to be honest. I'd spent a few years kind of trying to figure out, right, I've got a holiday each year to take, and how do people do this when you're active? You don't want to go lie on a beach. Perhaps, you know, your friends have other plans and other things they want to do. How do you go and have amazing holidays and experiences and trips, but on your own? So I was really excited to sort of find what I thought at the time, this is the answer. This is the answer. Go away, meet like-minded people, and have an absolutely epic adventure at the same time. So I think it was just huge amounts of excitement, to be honest. But I don't think anything can prepare you when you haven't been somewhere like Nepal before, or you haven't undertaken sort of, you know, that kind of solo expedition. Nothing can prepare you for what hits you when you get on the ground in somewhere like Kathmandu.
What was it like when you did reach Kathmandu? Can you try and describe that experience for us?
Oh my gosh, it was overwhelming. It was just a complete immersion in everything. You know, Nepal is still one of my absolute favorite places on earth, and I think you can't describe it. I think you have to sort of experience it. It was incredible, and it was also, you know, very sort of eye-opening. One of the biggest things actually was fear of we had to fly into Lukla. We were flying from Kathmandu into Lukla. And, you know, it's often sort of touted as the most dangerous airport in the world and things. And really, sadly, just the day before we were due to make that short flight out, another plane had gone down. And, you know, when you're new to this sort of adventure and expedition, it was really pretty scary. But the minute we touched down in the mountains in Lukla, it was just the most unbelievable thing. Although I have to say, flying into a cloud when you're on a plane that's relying entirely on visual navigation between huge rock faces is probably still one of the scariest things I've ever done, and I've done quite a lot since then.
Were you doing that with a group of other people? Did you know anybody else doing it, or were you just meeting people at the airport?
It was with a group, although everybody in the group was travelling alone, so nobody knew anybody else on the trip. And it's another huge takeaway from that, just the fact that when you choose to do these things, the other people that have chosen to do it too, you instantly have something in common. You have some kind of connection. And from that trip, you know, I have to say, a number of them are still some of my absolute best and dearest friends to date. In fact, two of them who also met on that trip got married last year, and two of the others of us were bridesmaids. So you just build sort of friendships and relationships that you just can't really replicate in any other situation, I think.
What year was that?
That was in 2011.
2011. I suppose I'm just trying to understand more. I think what's fascinating is the journey. So, you know, going on these adventures, going on these trips, you know, Borneo, when you were 17, heading off to Everest Base Camp in 2011. What sort of happened in between these challenges, these adventures, working your full-time job and actually deciding to make that decision to quit?
I mean, coming back from Nepal, it absolutely shaped everything from me. It opened my eyes to what else was out there, to experiences, to the feeling of just being so lucky to just be in these places. It was just an absolute privilege. So I came back from that with a not even a love for, just an absolute need to get back into the mountains and to see more of these amazing places. So I think coming back from Nepal, actually adjusting back to normal life was really strangely difficult, even though it was only a few weeks. So I very, very quickly booked myself onto another trip the following year, which was hiking 200 kilometers across the Alps, doing the Hiker's Hope route. And I think at the end of that trip, we actually got to climb the Brighthorn. which is, a sort of small sort of trekking peak. But, the first time I got to sort of carry an ice axe and trudge up a slope. And I thought, right, this is something. This is pretty cool. So it was sort of a series of small steps that kept building. So after that, I thought, right, the Alps, this is accessible. I can get there quickly. I can cram in as much as I possibly can. And I went back again with one of my great friends from the Everest Base Camp trip. And we thought, right, let's upskill ourselves a bit here. Let's get a bit more technical. So we went back to the Alps and we thought, let's try a bit of alpine climbing. So if anybody's ever been to Chamonix and gone up the Aiguilles de Midi, it's obviously beautiful and you get the most amazing views over to Mont Blanc and the various other mountains around. But this time, because we were sort of out to climb the Arête de Cosmique, so we got to take that trudge out of the climbers exit and get sort of looks from a lot of tourists thinking, are you crazy? And walk down what I now think of as the Ridge of Doom. It's still, again, one of the most horrible things I've ever done. But I did it, I think, about 6 times on that trip. So, yeah, got a taste for a bit more sort of serious, rock climbing and alpine climbing. And that drove me, as soon as I got back, to say, okay, I need somewhere else next that's another huge cultural immersion like Nepal was. And let's start hitting some altitude. Let's start climbing some bigger peaks. So the next year, which I think was around 2014, I went off to Ecuador. And the objectives there were climbing Cayambe and Cotopaxi and Chimborazo, which are all 5,000 and 6,000 meter peaks. And this time I really got to go and buy some proper kit. Although if any woman has ever tried to buy B3 mountaineering boots in an outdoor retailer, it's unfortunately the same old nigh on impossible trying to find things in small sizes. But that was all good fun. But I think it was when I was in Ecuador and climbing Cotopaxi that I sort of had my first real taste of actually being very, very scared in the mountains. We had a pretty harrowing experience climbing Cotopaxi, which, to all intents and purposes is a trekking peak. It should be fairly straightforward, but it really taught me an awful lot that you just cannot take anything for granted. And another huge point, which is that the summit is really only halfway when you're climbing something. It was a serious experience. So we were a group of 7. Again, it was the usual, myself and an awesome woman, Olga, and 5 other guys on this trip. And as we set out in rope teams of 2, started, alpine starts because obviously you're trying to minimize the risk of avalanche. So you want to be doing as much of the climb as possible before the sun sort of heats up the snow. So we set out, very early hours, rain, wind, it was pretty grim. And slowly but surely, unfortunately, the other rope teams were turning back until it was just myself and my rope mate continuing up on the summit. And we made it up to the top, which was fantastic. It was my first sort of real feeling of, my gosh, I am on the top of something incredible. I think Cotopaxi is sort of just under 6,000 meters. So it was just the biggest sense of, wow, I am so lucky to be able to be here. But at that point, I think naively, I sort of felt, right, I've done it. Let's just get down, have some hot food, enjoy the moment, revel in it, celebrate a little bit. But when we summited, it was actually a complete whiteout, so you couldn't see anything. And as we were traveling back down the mountain, you really couldn't see more than a couple of feet in front of you. You really couldn't sort of pick out the path, couldn't see what we were doing. And at that point, unfortunately, I took a bit of a slide, and it was just sort of a bit of a snail's pace slide on my backside down a few meters. But what was then very scary was to see my rope mate sliding past me and our guide then sliding past me and her. So not really had any technical training at that point. I had YouTubed videos on how to ice axe self-arrest. And thankfully, they came in incredibly handy as we basically all ended up hugging the mountain, ice axes firmly dug in and pretty shaken up. So the rest of the descent, which should have been just a couple of hours of fairly simple strolling down a mountain, actually turned into something completely different. And our guide was actually belaying us off his ice axe as we were sort of front pointing down the slope beneath him and sort of dodging the shards of ice coming down on our heads every time he was moving to re-anchor. So that was a huge learning point for me, into just, not to take anything for granted, that the summit is absolutely only halfway, and you've not successfully sort of done it until you've got back down safely as well.
I can just imagine being out there and dealing with that fear. I mean, obviously you talked about, the summit only being halfway, but that also must have been when you got back to base camp, suddenly thinking a lot more, having the opportunity to think, wow, something could have gone wrong there. Did that change how you did mountaineering in the future, or how you did expeditions in the future?
It really did. It changed my mindset a lot. I think the whole sort of, I guess you don't realize it at the time, but every single experience that you have all sort of these takeaways, and by the end of it, you sort of feel as if you've known these things forever. And of course, that's the case. But no, it's absolutely experiences like that have very much planted a lot of things in my mind that kind of guide how I do everything from now on.
I mean, I think what's interesting as well is you're working in banking, you're going on these incredible trips, visiting and traveling all over the world, going on these expeditions 4 or 5 weeks out at a time. Why did you decide to quit and do the adventuring thing full time?
I think for a number of years, probably since this sort of period, I was sort of thinking, this is something that I need to have more in my life, to feel more inspired, to feel a lot more engaged with the world around me. But as ever, it's a case of just not knowing how. Like, how on earth do you do that? And I'm sort of a big believer, I think, that there is no immediate answer. You can't say, this is what I want, how do I do it? There's the answer. That right there in front of you. But I do think that we all sort of subconsciously put all the things in place that kind of provide the opportunities or the answers, as kind of, twee as that sounds. So I think that it's been a sort of a whole process of saying, this is what I think would make me feel like there was a much more of a purpose. Like I was really achieving something or doing something, or at least experiencing something of the world, and not just, living day to day, or living for the weekends, or living for the holidays, or living for the escapes. It's pretty sad when 90% of your time is spent looking forward to the 10% that you're not doing it. So I sort of moved on from that, and I ran off to Mexico next, and went to climb Orizaba in Mexico, which is another one of the sort of, it's one of the volcanic 7 summits. And that again was another experience of climbing to 5,500 meters. There's some incredible climbing in Mexico, actually, and some brilliant stories, sort of folklore around some of the mountains there. So we had another brilliant ascent, and again, I sort of took more learning points from that as well, which was we found ourselves on one of the acclimatization treks, having been sent out with a teenage boy with an iPad, trying to guide us up the mountain, which was a little bit unnerving, I have to say. But thankfully, we had a bit of experience collectively between us that we sort of could basically override that and just crack on and do our own thing anyway. But, I took from that it's really important to be self-sufficient in what you're doing, not to just necessarily blindly trust that because you've paid a guide or you've hired someone that everything's fine. You can't sort of just relinquish your responsibility there. So it's just a huge series of small things that all add up, I think, to getting you to a position. But, this is back in 2014 and it's 2018 now, and I'm just starting to sort of realise a lot of the changes that are going on. So it's definitely a slow journey. It's a process, I think.
It's definitely something which, I don't know if it's just because I'm involved in like the adventure world now, but I seem or I seem to get emailed a lot, people are wanting to leave their jobs, leave their careers and go and be an adventurer and travel the world and go on these expeditions. In terms of making the decision for you to leave, was it an easy decision for you to make in terms of telling your friends and in terms of telling your family, and also for you to take that step?
Definitely wasn't, because if it was an easy decision, I would have done it, I think, back in 2014. I think I would have just absolutely gone, right, this is it, I'm doing it, I'm gone. But there was another sort of experience that happened in 2015 that really, really changed my whole mindset. Until then, I'd gone off and had great experiences and thought, this is what I love, this is what I'd really like to do. But to step out of the comfort zone, to actively walk away from, what you've been working very hard to build in terms of a career. And there's a huge factor, I think, of also feeling like if you just walk away from something, exactly that, what will other people think? Will they think that I'm ungrateful? Will they think that I'm crazy? What am I being ungrateful to walk away from what I'm very lucky to have provide me with a reasonably comfortable life where I can go off and do these amazing things in my holiday time. But then in 2015, myself and my friend Natasha again, who I'd met at base camp, decided it was time to go back to Nepal. And we wanted to go and climb a mountain there together this time. So we set our sights on climbing Mera Peak, which, so we headed back in April 2015, and we had the most incredible few weeks, completely sort of, middle of nowhere. We felt like we had this whole part of the Himalayas completely to ourselves, no one around. The weather was horrendous. It was snowing. It was closing the route behind us, which I think is why we really didn't see anybody else, and we did have it all to ourselves. And we had, just a really epic sort of couple of weeks of an adventure. It was wonderful. However, on the way back, we were climbing back up the valley, doing the usual thing when you're out and about, which is stopping to have lunch at about 10:30 in the morning because you've already been going for hours and you're starving. And it was an hour or two after that, as we continued climbing up and out of the valley, that our guide sort of suddenly grabbed us and pulled us in close, and we were on this little sort of plateau. And the ground was moving, and a huge slab of what we'd just been climbing up basically fell off beneath us. And we thought, my gosh, this is pretty crazy. This is scary. And we thought that there'd been a massive landslide. So a little bit shaken up, we sort of carried on, got to a hut later on that night and found another team that we'd sort of here and there bumped into, but really they'd been the only other people that we'd seen along the way. And they told us that, in fact, what had happened was the earthquake in Nepal. Which was crazy news. Gosh, it was mad to sort of be in that situation. But we were obviously insanely lucky. Absolutely fine. Everything was fine. So we, got word back home and managed to continue on climbing down to Lukla over the next day or two. And it was there that I think you really kind of got a sense of exactly what had happened and what was going on. There were obviously people trickling in from various parts of the mountains. The guys who'd been on obviously the Everest summit bids, and hikers, and obviously communities and locals and villagers and porters and Sherpas and everybody sort of congregating back in Lukla. To be honest, just so eye-opening, pretty sort of harrowing. But it was also hugely inspiring, seeing how people were seriously putting together a lot of community, a lot of team, a lot of sort of shared experience, and doing everything to kind of pull together going on. So that, to be honest, we were hugely lucky. We got a flight out of Lukla a few days later, and then only a couple of days after that managed to get back to London. And I think the experience of sort of being so in a situation, although again, just so incredibly lucky that we were absolutely fine. And then to be so removed from a situation and still seeing it all reported on the news, on the TV, it was a really, really strange sensation. It really, I think we felt sort of pretty useless, pretty helpless, and kind of pretty guilty, I think, for getting out of that situation. So taking away from that really just made me sort of equate this to saying, no, there is absolutely bigger things, real world things, real life happening everywhere outside of the walls of a sort of corporate glass box. And there are real things that you can be doing in that world that have an impact. They don't just make money for someone or something. And that any sort of tiny part in doing something useful or worthwhile or purposeful towards those things is worth doing. So I think it was that experience really that I already had the sort of want and the wish and the desire to do something kind of selfishly for myself, to want to be in these environments that I love, that made me feel sort of happy. But that experience in Nepal at doing Mera Peak and the earthquake made me realise that it wasn't just a want, it was actually a need, that I needed to feel like I was doing something that was a little bit more worthwhile.
Making the decision to quit, then actually quitting, what did you do in terms of preparation, and how much time did you give yourself? Did you decide, you know what, I'm going to give myself another year, I'm going to smack it really hard, get paid the bonus, and then leave? Or did you just think, you know, I can't do this anymore, I'm just going to leave no matter what, and just, you know, I've got enough savings to last me for X amount of time, and I'll figure it out as I go?
Yeah. The answer is all of those, I think, because I wanted to do it for a number of years. In 2016, I did do it. I handed in my notice. I had nothing to go to. I said, right, I am going to take a couple of months. I'm going to figure out what I'm doing. I actually had I had a great year that year. I was sort of running my first marathons and, you know, got a place in a sportive. So I bought a bike and I was off to climb Elbrus in August of that year. So I timed it. So I quit my job so that I would leave my job and then a few days later get on a plane, fly to Russia and climb the biggest mountain in Europe. And, you know, that would give me the headspace to kind of the inspiration and things to think, right, what's my next plan? But then a couple of days before I left to fly out to Elbrus, I received an offer of a job and doing what I did, but in a different company. And those thoughts came back in of going, am I crazy to turn this down? Am I hugely ungrateful? Other people are amazing people who really are looking for jobs. It's so difficult to find jobs these days. And I'm being offered one. And am I just a terrible person to turn this down? So I actually accepted the job, went off to Elbrus, came back, started this new job. And unfortunately, it transpired that I ended up in a really pretty difficult and really horrible working environment. And at the same time, there were a lot of other things going on, sort of, you know, the pretty difficult breakdown of a relationship, or a lot of things that it was basically, you know, playing a huge game of 52 card pickup with your life, throw it all in the air and see how it lands. And I ended up I had this really, it sounds really strange, I had this weird like visualization where I was just sort of cast adrift somewhere and there was just, you know, bits of my life kind of falling down from the sky and drifting off. And I was like, yeah, but what can I do with this? So I just sort of pictured, you know, grabbing up the bits that I thought were really me. What were the things that I loved about it? And kind of putting them back together and figuring them out in a new way. So it was at that point that I said, right, no, I really quit. I really do. Well, you know, this is not sustainable. This is not the way to go. So it's then that I put into motion everything, sort of quit the job. I got a lot more, I think the temptation often, as it definitely was with me at the time, to say, right, I should run off and do something big. I should go climb Denali. I should go, you know, set my sights on something huge that I really want to do and go and do it. And I thought, that's not really going to change anything. That's not really going to, you know, what then? You come back. What do you do next? So for the first time, I think I had this moment where I thought, right, don't focus on going away and just doing the things you want to do, but focus on trying to build something that you want to come back to. And I think mentally that was kind of a huge turning point for me, to try to work on, okay, what are the ways that I can try and build something here, something sustainable, that when I do go away and go and do something brilliant, something wonderful, something that I love, that actually when I come back, it's not the end, it's just the beginning of the next thing again. And I'm happy to come back and work towards whatever comes next.
Do you know, I think this is absolutely fascinating, and I hope you don't think I'm like trying to dig too deep, but I think it's just so important that we try and understand like the rationale behind the decisions that you've made and how you came to make those decisions, because I know there are so many women who've been in your situation, who are in your situation, and are just at this crossroads and they don't know what they want to do with their life, and whether that's they've never thought about it before, or they've just been in this career for so long, or they're just struggling to know. I mean, I think one of the questions that maybe that I get asked a lot, and it'd be interesting to get your perspective on as well, is, you know, when you start following your passions and turning what you do and something that you love into an actual job, or trying to make a career from it, have you found that challenging?
Absolutely, because I don't think at the moment I have sort of made a career of anything. I think that the decision making sort of early to mid last year of saying, right, no, really letting go of the job, I had to sort of mentally allow myself to stop feeling guilty about that, to not feel ungrateful, and to you know, I had to consciously allow myself to kind of do that. I am really lucky that obviously because it's been on my mind for a number of years, I have been trying to build myself a bit of a buffer that means that I can sort of take a few months of sort of following my passions, following my dreams, just the space to try to make things happen, to then kind of see what can come next. So the decision-making part of walking away was very, very easy. The what next part was incredibly difficult, because when that's just posed as a question, there's no answer. You know, otherwise it would be easy and we'd all have done it years ago, anybody with the same inclinations. So I think instead what I sort of started doing was just trying to engage a huge amount more with other people, and other people in the same situation, other like-minded people. And obviously that's where, you know, things like the Tough Girl group, other women's sort of adventure networks and things like that came into play. And I've been sort of sat silently looking at all of these things for a couple of years and sort of thinking, brilliant, these women are amazing, but I don't really qualify, because I just go on holidays. You know, I climb peaks, and I'm really lucky to be able to do great things, but you know, I don't really count. I'm not sure if I really, you know, it's the same old things of, I think a common theme these days is sort of imposter syndrome, isn't it? And a huge number of us at various times think, well, yeah, that's what everyone else does, but it's not really what I do. So I just started engaging a huge amount more with a lot of these groups and forums and other women. And then, you know, without really realizing it, found myself doing great things and, you know, heading out on quick random overnight wild camps where you'd hear stories from, you know, people who were just everyday people, normal people with jobs, but also were doing these incredible things on the side. And you just build up, I think, all this sort of network and this inspiration. You think, right, aside from maybe friends and family who are super, super supportive, but perhaps don't have the same things that drive them, it's brilliant to engage with other people, women, men, whomever, who really get that drive and that want to go and sort of have these kinds of experiences and do things like that. So that was a huge part in sort of the transition for me. And I think it kind of gave me permission a bit to say, no, this is something that I'm allowed to do, to sort of give it a go, and to kind of, you know, walk away from the corporate world.
You used a couple of great phrases there, you know, I don't really qualify, I don't count. And it's like, if we just even just look back at some, the adventures and the challenges that you've been on, Nepal, Mera Peak, Elbrus, Borneo, all these different peaks that you've summited all over the world, is absolutely amazing. But I think you have hit the nail on the head. It's this imposter syndrome. I don't belong here. There's so many other people who are doing bigger expeditions or better expeditions, and it can be sort of a very slippery slope to start to go down. I loved what you talked about with the engaging more, because I think that can be incredibly powerful to reach out and connect with other like-minded individuals who get it, who understand what you're saying and can appreciate, where you're coming from, what you want to go and do. You did an expedition with Love Her Wild, who we absolutely love, another amazing, supportive environment for women. Tell us a little bit more about the paddle pickup and how and why you decided to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that came about again through sort of engaging with these forums, and I'd had sort of this water theme, I think, had just sort of kept popping up in my head. And again, having the confidence then to start, putting yourself out there in these communities and these forums, and not sort of just being a silent observer in the background, which I think just kind of generates even more of a feeling of, maybe I don't quite belong here. Engaging with it. So I put a shout out actually onto a couple of these forums, sort of saying, I really feel like sea kayaking. Any recommendations? I had this urge to go sort of sea kayaking for a week or something. And yeah, it was Bex actually of Love Her Wild who popped a message back and said, well, how about paddle pickup? And I'd not heard of it, and it wasn't quite, my visions of sort of kayaking around the Isle of Wight or something like that. But I thought, hang on, there's a purpose to this. There's something useful to be doing as well, not just, a bit of a sort of self-indulgent fun thing for me to do. So I got to join onto that expedition with Bex and with Erin Bastian, which was fantastic. So that was obviously the expedition. They were sea kayak paddling across the width of the country, raising awareness of plastic pollution and clearing plastic wherever they could along the way, along with, I think they split, it was 300 kilometres and they split it into 100k sections. And women would sign up, I think, about 5 women per leg to sort of join on parts of the expedition. So I signed up for the last part, which was from out sort of near Bray, out and then through the Thames Barrier. So over the course of 5 days and sort of wild camping, and it just sounded fun. I was really keen to get out and do a physical challenge to do something like that, and to sort of feel like I was doing something useful, something purposeful at the same time. And obviously, clearing up what is ultimately other people's discarded rubbish from the waterways is I guess, can be counted as a good deed. So that really drew me to the expedition. And again, engaging with what I knew and obviously did turn out to be other like-minded people. So you can't really fail to have a great expedition.
So tell us more about that, because you met somebody on that expedition, didn't you? And that sort of led to almost to what you've created now, Dare to Do.
Yes, absolutely. So day one on the trip, pitching our tents in the middle of a sort of small common, actually, in Staines. So I'm not sure there's many people that have ever or would ever want to wild camp in Staines, but we were doing that. So obviously that instantly builds some camaraderie. And I was sharing a tent with Cyril, who instantly we sort of hit it off. So, a lot of the same views on the world, on life, on adventuring, and a lot of these things. So we had a lot of giggles along with all of the team over the next sort of 4 or 5 days. And it was just a fantastic experience. But from that, Cyril and I obviously kept in touch, sort of sharing all kinds of things, little sort of, I think we've both been very conscious and conscientious about the issues of plastics, of plastic pollution, and it really was an eye-opener seeing just what you get to fish out of the rivers and things. It's madness what ends up in there, and you think, how does this happen, and what on earth can be done? There must be really straightforward things to do to prevent it. So we sort of shared lots of ideas and thoughts and inspiration, and we met up again in October down in Bristol for the She Extreme Film Festival and the WA Expo, which are obviously fantastic events. And again, you can't help but just be incredibly inspired being there and seeing what everybody's doing, talking to people, engaging, networking. It's brilliant hearing all the stories. So we came away from that in October, again thinking, there's something here. I think we should do something. So we decided to form our own adventure team, because we're hearing a lot from other people about men, women, people sort of going off and having these incredible and awe-inspiring adventures on their own, but sort of thinking, well, there's not many people that are doing it as a team, as a duo. And between us, we have sort of pretty diverse but sort of complementary backgrounds and skills, but very much sort of shared goals and ideas and passions for things. So we thought there could be a lot here that we could bring by bringing it together. So the seeds of our team Dare to Do were formed, and we quickly sort of started coming up with an idea and saying, we want to go on an adventure. We want to do something really fun, possibly pretty silly, a little bit crazy, something very new, but we really want to do something useful while we're doing it. We want to use that as a platform to actually do something worthwhile. So we came up with the idea of our first expedition, which was, the expedition was called Grand, and it was to packraft the length of the Grand Union Canal, and again clear all the plastic and all the rubbish that we could along the way. And it was also sort of an exercise in trying to sort of understand what the issue was, because it's all very well raising awareness, but what we also want to do is try to be able to champion or provide people with information about the possible solutions as well. How can we stop this from being a problem? So that was very much what the expedition was about, but also really sort of a reason to go off and do something slightly mad. So in January, of all things, we hit the canals in Birmingham and set out on our inflatable pack rafts.
How was it? Apart from being cold.
I was going to say, first answer is cold. It was cold. We had great timing because our launch date coincided with Storm Eleanor. So 60-mile-an-hour winds in a pack raft is a little bit ambitious, even for us. So we had to delay the start and hole up in Birmingham for a day. So a pack raft, if anybody hasn't, looked one up, they're fantastic. They are the best inventions ever. They're teeny tiny, as in they sort of pack down to a really small size. They only weigh a couple of kilos, but within a couple of minutes you can inflate them and have a sort of fully useful craft to get about on the water with. But they're not as efficient as things like sea kayaks. So they have a max speed of around about 3 miles per hour on flat water. And in the wake of Storm Eleanor, we were dealing with headwinds of 15 miles per hour. On a route that was 250 kilometres, we weren't making much progress with the weather. I think one day we sort of spent about 5 hours of paddling and had made literally a few kilometres of headway. So, intensive training, effectively, it was. It was a good workout, but pretty hard in the weather conditions. And we were hitting sheets of ice. We were having to break ice with our paddles, let alone then plunging your hands into the water to try to drag out any of the general detritus and rubbish that we were seeing in the canal as well.
So how would you rate your first challenge?
It was fantastic. It was brilliant. So I think another, there's always something to take away and something to learn from it. And from that, we sort of learned, okay, you go in with a plan, you do all of the preparation you can, but just as important as that is being able to adapt it, to figure out what it is that's really important, what are you trying to achieve, and to be able to flex your plan to be able to accommodate that. So it became apparent a few days in that with the ice, with the winds, the residual sort of effects of the storm, we weren't going to be able to make the headway that we needed to every day, and at the same time be able to collect the plastic. So we were saying to ourselves, what's most important here? Is it most important that we complete the adventure, the challenge, the sort of world first, that we packraft the full length? And if we do, then it means that we can't do the benefit to the best of our sort of abilities, which is to actually clear up, the things that we can from the canal. So, without any shadow of a doubt, we said, no, the important thing here is to be purposeful. And it would have been absolutely heartbreaking, to be honest, to keep paddling on through stretches where it was just horrendous what we were finding, but just to keep on paddling selfishly so that we could hit our own personal sort of adventure goal. So we kind of turned into a bit of a roving plastic pollution hit squad. And we, threw it out to all the networks, all the sort of people with vested interest in the canals, the trusts, the charities, the people who live on the canals and things like that, and said, right, tell us where is grim, tell us what is terrible, so that we can sort of swoop in and try and do the maximum good that we can. So that's sort of how it sort of panned out towards the latter part of the expedition. It was a fantastic experience, and by the end of it, we had cleared out nearly 2,000, completely crazy assorted items from polystyrene and plastic bottles and microplastics and just random things, up to bikes and huge items as well. So, yeah, it was an experience, absolutely, but a fantastic one.
What are the plans going forward? What have you got? What are you hoping to achieve in 2018?
Huge things on the horizon in 2018. Huge things. So at the same time as launching Dare to Do, I had a conversation with an awesome woman called Kaz, who was recruiting the final spots in a crew to row across the Pacific in June of this year in the Great Pacific Race. So the race is covering 2,400 miles, traveling from, self-propelling, rowing ourselves from Monterey in California over to Hawaii. So that, I'm still a bit in awe of it. I'm still a bit overwhelmed. So that's why my brain is sort of stumbling over it. So we had conversations back in December. Kath has just been incredibly resilient about it. She, was signed up to do this in August of last year, I think. And a huge number of changes and things around her sort of essentially meant that, she found herself going from being in a full crew to essentially being in a boat on her own, and the massive task of, with not much notice, trying to recruit 3 other women who were possibly mad, but also ambitious and driven enough to want to join her in that boat and compete in the race. So I got involved, and I was absolutely sold. It's an idea that's been in my mind for a number of years, but the timing and the opportunity and things, they haven't all come together. But this time it's really been the most incredible thing to sort of land my way. So I roped in Cyril. I said instantly, I know another woman that's going to be right on this. So Dare to Do as the team are joining the crew, and our 4th member is another fantastic woman with a huge amount of experience on the seas, based in the US, Andrea. So we've got our crew together, and we are on. We are hitting the Pacific in June of this year and trying to beat a world record as we do.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, woo! That is going to be a big challenge. How are you sort of feeling about it all? Because you've got to raise like £20,000 for your seat.
Yeah, it's huge. It's a huge task. It's an absolutely huge task. And obviously the most important thing for us. So as a crew, our crew is called Pacific Terrific. And as our crew, we are motivated hugely, obviously, by the adventure, by the experience. That's what's drawn us all towards it. But very much the driving force behind it as well is, again, wanting to be purposeful, wanting to be able to do something good, do something useful, use it as a platform to be able to make a difference in some way. So obviously we want to, aside from the cost of ocean rowing is immense, as I know, you've had some incredible other women who have sort of completed these events, completed a number of ocean rows and things. And it's a theme, getting to the start line is one of the most difficult things. It's a huge amount to try to raise. But over and above that, obviously wanting to do as much good, to get as much awareness and donations and things raised for your chosen charity as well is huge. So we're doing this for 2 things. We're doing this in the hopes of being able to raise funds for Mind, which obviously is an incredible charity and one that I think, works towards things that do touch all of us, and whether it's directly, indirectly, friends, family, these are sort of very important issues, and to kind of try to raise awareness and donations and things is hugely important for us. But also to try to, again, put a spotlight on plastics in the oceans, trying to get people engaged with the simple things that we can all do in our everyday lives that can minimize the impact. Whether it's just reduction in single-use plastics, whether it's, skipping buying that extra water bottle and carrying one yourself. These are all seriously important things. So over and above getting ourselves to the start line, we really want to try to do something good, do something useful, and raise as much money, as much awareness for those causes as possible.
I mean, there's a lot going on there. It's the sponsorship, it's doing the charity, it's doing the publicity, it's getting yourself fit, it's the mental preparation. That's going to be a busy few months for you, which is exciting. How do you think you're going to balance it all out?
It is busy. It's funny. I'm, given that I sort of quit my job, and banking isn't the most laid back of industries, shall we say? And people often say to me now, so, what are you doing with your free time? So you're just chilling out now. It's like, do you know what? I have never put so many hours in my life. But the difference is that obviously it's the things that I care about, the things that I'm passionate about. So there's a huge amount of work going on behind the scenes, whether it's from physically training. Obviously, the rowing machine is my absolute new best friend. We're spending a lot of time together, but through to sort of the fundraising and things like that. So it's absolutely massive. There's a reason that we sort of, I think, all have come into this boat and thought this is absolutely the right thing in the right time. And it's because we just share completely the same outlook, which is, we are super ambitious. We're super determined. We are absolutely going for the world record on this, which stands at 50 days and 19 hours and 14 minutes. Obviously, there's other factors, the weather, everything has to sort of work in our favour, but that is absolutely the ambition. But the biggest thing that brings us all together is that we all have such, I think, kind of motivation and belief that actually it's the mental preparation as much as the physicality of it that puts you in the position to be able to succeed. So I know when people are putting crews together, they have different approaches, and some people would say, right, I need elite rowers, only elite rowers in my boat. And others, like ourselves, say, do you know what, we think that it's the ability to deal with difficult situations, to be able to overcome them, to be able to be resilient, to be tough when put in really uncomfortable, difficult, challenging situations, and still be able to do the things you need to do to carry on and come out the other side. So we all very, very much share those sorts of experiences. We all come from sort of different adventuring type backgrounds, whether it's, huge sailing across oceans or, completing ultra marathons and channel swims, to spending 5 months on a mammoth hike. These are all sort of the different types of backgrounds we come from, and the things that I think bring us together and make us think, no, absolutely, we're doing this, and we're really, really going to go for it and make it happen.
Megan, in terms of advice and tips for other women, I would say almost in relation to advice and tips around making the change, to follow your passions, to follow your interests, to step outside of your comfort zone. What advice would you have?
Gosh, yes, it's so tricky, but it's actually not. It's not tricky. Number one, I think you just have to sort of be bold enough and brave enough to engage. Get talking to people, get involved in the networks, get working with other people, take every opportunity, and it just snowballs. One thing generates the next thing, and before you know it, you're sort of set down a path, and it feels like things are just sort of magically happening, but actually you're putting yourself in a position for those things to come up. So sort of be brave enough to kind of engage and get involved. And I think, it's sort of letting go of that idea of, I said, I think I struggled with feeling perhaps guilty for walking away from what was a perfectly kind of comfortable setup. And I thought, people think I'm crazy. But you know what, I was incredibly lucky that I had the opportunity. But I think you also have to allow yourself to take it. And it is very much allowing yourself to do it, I think. So to anybody in that position, it's so difficult because I toyed with it for years, absolutely years. But as a first step, then absolutely get engaging with people. Go to events, go on wild camps, go to whatever it is, talks to presentations to evenings. Just start joining in those conversations online. Just get involved, and you never know what comes from it.
So Megan, there's a couple obviously things that you've mentioned there: the Dare to Do, the Pacific Terrific. Do you just want to share where's the best place for people to find out more information about you, about Serial, about the Pacific Row? You know, where would you send people to?
Yes, absolutely. We have Facebook groups. So on Facebook for the Ocean Row, it's, if you look up at Pacific Terrific Crew, and the website is www.pacificterrific.com. And that has everything at the moment that you could possibly want to know. You can obviously sign up to, like us, follow us, share, sign up to get news on, all the updates. There'll be obviously live race tracking and things as well when we hit the water. So it's going to be a really, really, really exciting journey. And all the support would mean the world to us. It really, really would. And for Dare to Do, again, on Facebook, if you look up Dare to Do, it's TWO, as in there are two of us. And again, dare2do.com.
Megan, what an incredible journey that you've been on. What an incredible 2018 it's going to be for you. There is just so much happening. I wish you all the success in the world. Best of luck with all of these future challenges. I know you're going to go out and absolutely smash them.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Hey tribe, how you doing? I hope you are having a fabulous Tuesday wherever you are, whatever you are doing. I'm so glad that you have subscribed to the Tough Girl podcast. If you are new, welcome, welcome, welcome. Amazing to have you here. And if you are one of the listeners who has been with me for a while, thank you so much for continuing to listen. Now, as we were talking with Megan, there's lots of potential links and episodes that I'd like to recommend to you. So Megan talked about Love Her Wild, which was created by Beck's band. So we've interviewed Bex, and Beck shared more about her own journey into becoming an ordinary adventure. That's what she calls herself. She's also created Love Her Wild, another very inclusive and supportive place for women. You go check out their Facebook group. Megan also talked about sea kayaking with Erin Bastian. I have interviewed Erin as well, another incredible woman. She does very brilliant movies as well, and a few members of Tough Girl Tribe has also gone on trips with her. She's got a few more trips coming up, so you can go and listen to Erin as well, which is super exciting. Obviously, we ended that episode with talking about rowing oceans, and I've interviewed a lot of ocean rowers from I'm going to struggle to remember them all. But we had Sally Kettle. We have had Natalia Cohen, Lauren Morton. Oh, I know that we've had a few more. Oh, we've had the 4 mums who rowed across the Atlantic Ocean. We spoke to 2 of them. I'm sure I've spoken to more ocean rowers, but this is what we're getting to now, guys. There's over 130 episodes of the Tough Girl podcast available. The podcast was started back on the 4th of August, 2015. There's new episodes come out every single Tuesday, sometimes on a Thursday if Tough Girl Extra is running. So look out for those. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. But there are so many incredible stories, so many adventurers, so many challengers, so many athletes, so many swimmers, runners, walkers, mountaineers. There is a massive, massive spectrum of women who I've interviewed. So please do go check out toughgirlchallenges.com. And on there, you can find, on the website, you can find the Tough Girl blog, you can find the show notes, you can find links to my own personal challenges, most recently the Appalachian Trail, and also the 3 books that I've written, one on shallow hosting, one on climbing Kilimanjaro, and the other on running the Marathon des Sables. So hopefully you will find that interesting and inspiring. So please do go check it out. As always, I could not do this without your support. I appreciate it so much. Please do go and sign up to become a patron, patreon.com. This is how I fund the running costs of the podcast. Like anything in life, it is not free. It is obviously free for you to listen to. and it will continue to be free, but it does cost me my time, my energy, my resources, and all the other running costs associated with the podcast. If you've been listening to it for a while, sign up, become a patron, get involved. $5 a month makes a huge difference. That works out something like £3.50, I think, a month, which isn't a lot for the amount of quality and the amount of content that you are getting. So please do go check out patreon.com. Just want to do a quick shout out. So the Tough Girl Tribe is now actually closed to new members. So if you want to sign up to the closed Facebook group, which is incredibly supportive and inclusive, then go and check out patreon.com, and then you can sign up and become a member. Just want to do a quick shout out actually to Ginny Amanda, who has recently just passed her climbing assessment. So she's now officially an ice climbing guide. Ginny, absolutely fantastic. Well done for persevering. You did get there. What an awesome way to kick off 2018. I hope all your goals are going well, whatever that you have set yourself to achieve in 2018, as well as setting your goals, which is fantastic, writing them down, printing them out, creating a visual representation. The next key thing that you have to do, actually, there's two key things I would suggest, is tell somebody what your goals are, and to take the first step. So if you haven't done anything towards your goals yet, do something today, whether that is finding out where your local gym is, whether it's doing some research on a challenge you want to do, whether it's signing up for that race, whether it's thinking, you know what, I actually need to start a regular savings scheme. I need to start putting £10 a week away to start saving up for my adventure fund, or actually, you know what, I'm going to contribute in that group, or I'm going to sign up for that talk, I'm going to go along and network, I'm going to join that running club, I'm going to put my trainers on and go for that swim, even put my trainers on and go for a swim, put my trainers on and go for that run, or I'm going to pop out to the swimming pool, go for a swim, I'm going to get on my bike, whatever it is. Take action today. Go on, take that first step. You know you can do it. If you are new to the podcast, then we have had some amazing episodes in January. We kicked off the year speaking with Beth French. She's an ultra marathon open sea ocean swimmer. She was once a Buddhist nun. She's now a single mother who homeschools her autistic son. She's also an adventurer. She suffered with ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, in her youth, and she shares a lot about how she's overcome that. We've also spoken with Maria, I can't pronounce her surname, Legestam, who's a Welsh British polar adventurer. She was the first person to cycle to the South Pole from the edge of the continent in 2013. Very fascinating and interesting story. We've also spoken to Antonia Bolingbroke-Kent, who's a travel writer, TV producer, and she set a crazy Guinness World Record for driving a tuk-tuk, which was pink. How awesome is that? 12,500 miles from Bangkok to Brighton. We've also caught up with Mina Holder, who's a 36-year-old primary school teacher who's run the full length of New Zealand and Great Britain. And obviously, Megan Hoskin as well, our final guest for January. So please do make sure you hit that subscribe button. Please leave a review. Come and say hi. Give me a shout out on Twitter. I love that. It's @_tough_girl. Otherwise, guys, have an amazing day. Enjoy what you're doing today. Just give it your all. The more you put into anything, the more you get out of it. And I will be with you next Tuesday for another awesome episode of the Tough Girl podcast. All right, take care. Lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.